Case 0, Informer Co. The golden light of the sun crept up the buildings of lower Manhattan. It looked like liquid, like a jar of juice getting poured out in reverse. The smog was light this evening, and what clouds there were cast feathery shadows in the fading light. Since the year 1990, New York City had been plagued with an increase in violent crime. As the NYPD was spread thinner and thinner, many victims of crime found themselves unable to find justice, which led to an increase in private investigators for hire around the city. Most of these PIs weren't professionals, but since the police only responded to the most serious of crimes, it wasn't hard for them to find work. One such investigator, a young woman who had just traveled halfway across the city, found herself outside a building emblazoned with the words Informer Co. Taking a breath and begging herself to remain calm, the woman reached forward and pushed on the metal handles of the detective agency's doors. When the doors responded to her push with resistance, she frowned. "Pull doors. Great start," she muttered as the doors creaked on their hinges and opened outwards for her. When she stepped in, she was met with a dimly lit waiting area and was relieved that no one happened to be by the door. She didn't want anyone to catch her fumbling before she even had the chance to be interviewed. As she sat down in the empty waiting room, hoping the uncomfortable stillness would soon pass, the sun slowly drifted down in the sky. She plucked on the rubber bands on her wrist as she thought. Had she arrived early? She could have sworn the on-site interview was set for 6. She pulled out the crumpled note, where she wrote the meeting time and address, and confirmed that this was indeed the time she had copied from the letter. Maybe she wrote it down wrong? As these thoughts swam through her head and her uneasiness grew, time slowly marched forwards until the sun had descended almost completely out of sight. Only a few streaks of reds and oranges remained on the far-off skyline when she heard the creaking of a door to her right. She looked up. A woman that looked about her age stepped through the door. She had long, blonde hair that curled lightly around her shoulders and bangs that hid a furrowed, tired brow. She yawned, covering her mouth with a pale hand. The other, that supported the door, was also holding a large black umbrella. Her style of dress could only be described as a strange mix of business and biker. She had a black studded leather jacket with silver shoulder pads, a black skirt landing a few inches above her knees, washed-out gold leggings, and laced leather boots. She had a regal air to her, and her green eyes commanded a sense of awe that caused the more casually dressed girl to shudder. When neither of them said anything after a pause, the interviewee offered a smile and stood up. The blonde woman did not return it.
"Are you the new recruit?"
Despite the unenthusiastic tone in which the blonde had spoken, her deep voice was entrancing. The woman released the door and held it instead of her foot. She crossed her arms and eyed the candidate. Yeah, I'm Rita Zeppeli. I was supposed to meet with Brienne today at 6. If this is a bad time, I can always come back.
"I'm Amanda. Come with me."
The blonde cut her off and stepped forward to offer Rita access to the staircase behind the office door. She motioned for her to enter. As she stood, Rita hesitated, taking note of the large umbrella. Wasn't the city in the middle of a drought? Amanda noted her hesitation, her critical gaze demanding eye contact from Rita.
"Hurry up. We don't have all night."
Rita's pace quickened. She passed the threshold of the door and descended the stairs with Amanda following behind. The door closed with a thud behind them, and artificial light guided them below. When they reached the bottom of the staircase, they stopped together at a large wooden door. Amanda opened it and stood to the side as she gestured for Rita to enter. Rita looked around at the room. It was fairly spacious and boring. It reminded her of her high school principal's office. Lining the walls were bookshelves filled with files and large textbooks. While she spotted the occasional map on the wall or snow globe wedged between the books, Rita noticed there were no personal items, not even a family picture. At the center of the space was a large desk covered in papers, books, and a state-of-the-art desktop computer. A distinguished woman with a focused hand was scratching the tip of pencil against paper, while her other clicked on the keyboard. Without looking up, the woman spoke.
"Thank you for getting her, Amanda."
The blonde lady nodded and, without another word, left for what Rita could only assume was her own workspace. She found herself unable to keep from watching Amanda as she walked away, eyes snapping back to the front as soon as she was out of sight. After a moment, Brienne put her pencil down and spoke.
"I apologize for the wait. I've been quite busy today, and I find myself unable to make any progress if I'm interrupted in the middle of work. That's no longer a concern, so let us proceed with your interview."
She beckoned to a chair in front of her desk. "Yes, ma'am," Rita replied, taking the seat.
"Do you know why you got this job offer?"
I suppose you heard I was starting up my own private business in this field? Buy out the competition and all that. I don't know why else I'd appear on your radar. She picked at the bands around her wrist again, maintaining eye contact with Brienne. Brienne paused and wrote something down.
I suppose you wouldn't. Tell me, did you see anything aside from Amanda on your way in? Something reflective, perhaps?
Rita blinked. Reflective? You don't have any mirrors in this office, if that's what you're asking. No windows either, now that I think about it. Pretty well lit in here though, so I guess you don't need them.
I see.
She wrote down something else.
Tell me about your background, family, reason for joining this line of business, and skills.
Well, I was raised by my mother down in DC, only recently came back up to New York. You know the rest. I'm sure you did a background check before scouting me. She shifted in her seat before continuing on. I joined this business because I'm good at noticing things and even have some practice from when I played detective as a kid. For skills, I'm pretty good at blending into crowds and even better at sneaking into places unnoticed. Figured I'd specialize in finding out if rich husbands are cheating on their rich wives, but your offer works too.
Glad to hear about your excitement for the position,
Brienne said dryly.
In any case, I still do not know your skill level in the field, so you will have to go through a trial period of training before I can officially sign you on. It is important to me to make sure my employees are a good fit for our usual clientele. I also need to see if you can work on a team. So for now, I will place you with Morgan. She's in the office down the hall with the checkered door. You can't miss it.
Rita shrugged, standing up. Sounds good to me. I won't let you down. She was ignored. Brienne had already gone back to whatever she was working on before starting the interview.
We'll see,
she muttered under her breath. Once again, she was alone in her office as Rita's excited footsteps echoed in the hall. Page break. Rita walked into the room where she was supposed to meet her partner for her first mission. The carpets looked like something straight out of the arcade from down the street. The walls were all sorts of different colors, and were those glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling? For how strict Brienne seemed in the interview, she sure gave her employees a lot of freedom when it came to office decoration. One thing was certain, this room was brighter than any other Rita had visited so far.
Yo, what's up? You must be the new recruit.
A shout came from the center of the room. Sitting back, her feet propped up on her desk, was a blonde whose fashion choices resembled the room she was in. She wore a bright pink cap on backwards, a similarly neon urban vest with a checkerboard shirt, and some light-up shoes. Rita didn't know they made those for adults. The woman stretched before she stood up.
The name's Morgan. Nice to meet ya. I take it Brienne gave us our first assignment together?
Yeah, Brienne said.
It's just a basic info run, right? Sneak into a place and snatch what we need. I'm pretty good at these kind of jobs, but I'll let you take the lead. Just tell me when we gotta head out.
Rita blinked, a little overwhelmed. All right then. If you have the target, we can, go now? No point in waiting around.
Sounds good to me. Lead the way, newbie. I'll fill you in on the way.
Right.
Page break. Amanda pushed open a door labeled Sally Reed and stepped into a room that looked like something akin to a laboratory. Beakers lined the countertops, and a trio of bulky machines that hummed and clunked occupied the back wall. They were connected to a towering computer, which had been plastered with dark stickers for different bands. The surface of the lab's fume hood was cluttered with delicate glass pipettes and plastic plates. As the door shut behind her, Amanda's reserved expression exposed a hint of mirth, and her shoulders lightly shook as she let out a stifled laugh into her hand. Hearing this display, a figure tinkering with the equipment in the room spoke.
What's up with you?
Sally asked. She was fiddling with something that looked like a spool of delicate copper wire, curled into a neat circle, but she pushed it away gently. She adjusted the front of her long gray coat and shook her bright purple hair off of her face. Amanda looked up, her expression mute again, except for the slight smile on her lips. The new kid. She doesn't have a stand. Sally, now intrigued, leaned over the table in Amanda's direction and slid her lab goggles up to rest on top of her head.
Really? You sure?
She grinned, as if it was a joke, and removed her insulated gloves so that she could rest her chin in her hands. Absolutely. She never looked away from me, even when I let mine out.
Weird. She must be a damn good detective then.
Doubtful. I listened to her interview with Brienne. Her experience with detective work comes from playing detective as a kid. Sally frowned.
She's in way over her head then. There's no way she's going to take her first stand encounter well.
Definitely not. Amanda's smile grew slightly, and now Morgan's stuck with babysitting a blind junior detective on her first job. They were silent for a moment, considering why Rita, of all people, had been singled out by Brienne. Their boss had mentioned in passing that she had found them a promising new team member, but they had never predicted that Rita would be so ill-equipped for their line of work. Eventually, Sally spoke.
Well, you know just as well as I do that Brienne wouldn't choose her unless she had potential.
Maybe so, but potential is just about all she has. Amanda stepped forward. Anyway, Sally, I'm here for a drink.
Sure thing.
Sally turned around and crouched in front of a black curtain covering a section of cabinet space. She pushed it aside to reveal a mini-fridge, which she opened. She removed 2 black wine bottles. Their labels were torn off and replaced with cream-colored pieces of tape that listed opening and expiration dates. She offered them to Amanda.
Try not to drink them too fast this time.
Amanda took the bottles and raised an eyebrow. Says the woman that wants me to use my powers over and over again for experiments. The more I use them, the more blood I need. Don't complain about a problem you cause. She sunk a razor-sharp canine tooth into the cork of the bottle in her left hand, twisted, and ripped the cork from the bottle with a satisfying pop. Then she took a long, slow sip, downing half the bottle and savoring every drop. Sally fumbled for a slightly stained notebook and a pen, which she used to note the time and quantity of blood consumption.
This is going right into my spreadsheet.
Amanda scowled, wiping some residual red streaks from her lips. Are you sure all this record-taking bullshit is really necessary? Sally smirked and read along as she wrote.
The subject is tense and displays aggression, even while ingesting blood directly.
Amanda scooped up the bottles in her right hand and held up a middle finger with her left. She kicked the door open with a flourish and stomped out, smirking once she was out of sight.